Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a stack of sources that cut across some truly vital global conversations. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, those surprising insights, basically helping you get well-informed and fast. We've got quite the range today. We'll be covering electoral democracy intricacies in India, some really cutting-edge science, the economics behind global conflict, and the future of tech innovation. Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting today in the editorial section with a critical look at what's happening with voter rolls in Bihar, India. We've got a couple of pieces detailing this. Special Intensive Revision, or SARR, of electoral rolls. It's presented apparently as just a routine update, but these articles, they argue it's, well, anything but routine.
That's right. The SIR, it's a really profound administrative exercise. We're talking about nearly 4.74 crore voters.
Wow, that's what, almost 48 million people?
Exactly, close to 60% of Bihar's entire electorate, and they're now required to prove their eligibility again, but with a new set of documents.
New documents, like what?
Things like birth certificates, school-leaving papers, maybe land deeds, stuff that honestly is a huge challenge to produce, especially in rural areas. The state just hasn't historically issued these documents at scale, so the burden is now completely on individuals to get these papers, and within a really tight time frame, too.
And one of the most striking things the articles mention is this kind of Kafka-esque twist.
Oh, yeah.
Where the Election Commission of India, the ECI, is now apparently saying its own voter ID cards aren't good enough anymore, along with other IDs like Aadhaar.
Precisely. That's one of the most jarring points. These IDs, which were previously the standard, are now deemed insufficient proof.
So what's the practical impact of that? Who does this hit hardest?
Well, the impact is disproportionate and, frankly, quite severe. It hits the poor, it hits Muslims, and critically, it hits Bihar's huge population of migrant workers.
Right, you mentioned they're about 20% of the population.
Around that figure, yes. And the articles, they draw this stark parallel to the NRC exercise in Assam, the National Register of Citizens. They're saying this Bihar process feels like a de facto NRC, but importantly, without any legislative backing or judicial oversight. It just shifts the whole burden of proof.
From the state to the person.
Exactly. The state no longer has to prove someone isn't a citizen to remove them. The individual has to prove they are eligible to remain on the rolls.
And the timing. The articles highlight this deeper political logic, right? Happening just months before state elections.
Yes, the timing is definitely flagged as significant. There's a potential for millions of voters, potentially legitimate voters, to be removed just before an election.
Which could obviously swing results in close contests.
It absolutely could. It could decisively influence outcomes.
So what does this mean for, like, the basic idea of natural justice?
Well, that's the core concern. And what's fascinating, or perhaps chilling, is how the article suggests this isn't just about Bihar.
You mean it could be used elsewhere?
Exactly. It could be a template, a sort of administrative strategy for similar revisions in other states, potentially weakening pluralism nationally by excluding certain groups.
Let's stick with Bihar for a moment, drawing on the second article, also from the editorial section. It mentions people are calling this vote bandy. That sounds familiar.
Yes, it draws a direct parallel to Note Bandy, the 2016 demonetization. It reflects the suddenness, the lack of transparency, the disruption felt by ordinary people.
And it reinforces the comparison to the Assam NRC.
It does, but it also points out some crucial differences that make the Bihar situation perhaps even more intense.
How so?
Well, the Assam NRC, despite all its issues, was a 6-year process overseen by the Supreme Court. The Bihar SAR aims for a complete reconstruction of the rolls for 50 million voters in just 1 month.
1 month. During monsoon season.
1 month during monsoon season and peak migration season when many workers are away. It's an incredibly ambitious, some would say impossible, timeline.
And you mentioned the documents again. The article lists 11 specific ones.
Yes. 11 enabling documents specified by the ECI. Things like birth certificates, matriculation degrees. Documents the article stresses are rarely available to the average person in Bihar.
While the IDs people actually have voter cards, Aadhaar are rejected. It seemed designed to exclude.
It certainly raises that question very strongly, and the impact on migrants is profound.
How does it affect them specifically?
Bihar has massive outmigration. Almost every family has someone working or studying elsewhere. These migrant workers are now at serious risk. They could be removed for not being ordinarily resident in Bihar, even though economic necessity forces them to live and work outside the state.
So the very act of trying to earn a living could disenfranchise them.
That's the cruel irony highlighted. Their circumstances could make them outsiders electorally.
So what does this all mean, fundamentally?
The article warns it's a fundamental disruption of India's electoral democracy. It risks creating a permanent category of disenfranchised citizens.
Like second-class citizens?
Essentially, yes. Second-grade and absolutely insecure citizens is the phrase used. It strikes right at the heart of universal adult franchise, the idea that every adult citizen has the right to vote. This process puts that very principle at risk.
Okay, this raises huge legal questions. Let's move to our third source, this one from the opinion section. It dives into the powers of the Election Commission of India, the ECI. Does the ECI really have unfettered powers to just conduct an exercise like this?
That's the central question the article tackles, and the answer, according to the legal analysis presented, is no. While Article 324 of the Constitution does grant the ECI enormous powers for conducting free and fair elections, the Supreme Court even called it a reservoir of power.
But there's a catch.
There's a big catch. The Supreme Court itself, in a landmark case, Mohinder Singh Gill versus the Chief Election Commissioner back in 1978, clarified these powers are not unfettered. The key principle is, where a valid law exists covering a particular aspect of elections, the ECI must conform to that law. It can't just override it.
Okay, so the law takes precedence. And here's where it gets really interesting. The article says this SRR in Bihar doesn't conform to the main law governing voter registration.
Exactly. The article argues there are specific, clear nonconformities with the Representation of the People Act, 1950, the RPA.
Can you break those down for us? What are the conflicts?
Sure. The article details several. First, the qualifying date. The ECI order for Bihar mentions July 1st, 2025. But under the RPA, the qualifying date for electoral roll should be January 1st of the year the roll is prepared or revised. So for 2025, it should be Jan 1st, 2025, that July date. No legal basis.
Okay, what else?
Second, the term itself, special intensive revision. The article states this specific phrase isn't actually found anywhere in the RPA or the associated rules.
Well, they kind of invented a term.
It appears that way, yes. And third, perhaps most significantly, the law states that a special revision can only be ordered for a specific constituency, or maybe part of one, if there's a particular reason. It doesn't seem to allow for ordering a special revision for an entire state like Bihar all at once.
Right. And there was one more point about the documents.
Yes, Rule 8 of the Registration of Electors rules. It says voters should furnish information to the best of ability. The article interprets this to mean that electoral officers can't just summarily reject applications because someone lacks foolproof documents proving citizenship, especially when other evidence exists. It implies a degree of flexibility.
So, summing up this legal perspective, the conclusion is pretty stark, isn't it?
It is. The article concludes that the SIR in Bihar, as currently structured, doesn't align with several key provisions of the RPA. This raises serious questions about its legality, not just its fairness or potential political motives. It challenges its very foundation in law and natural justice.
All right, let's shift gears completely now. We're moving from the complexities of electoral law to the frontiers of science. Our next source, from the science section, is really fascinating. It's about scientists using CRISPR gene editing to create a new kind of rice.
Yes, this is work from the National Institute of Plant Genome Research, NIPGR, in India. They've used CRISPR-Cas9 to develop rice with enhanced phosphate uptake.
Phosphate. That's fertilizer, right? Why is uptake so important?
Phosphorus, which plants get from phosphate, is absolutely essential for growth. But plants are actually quite inefficient at absorbing it from fertilizer. Typically, only about 15 to 20% of the phosphate applied is actually used by the plant. The rest often gets locked up in the soil or washes away, which can cause environmental problems like algal blooms.
Okay, so we waste a lot of fertilizer. What do the NIPGR scientists achieve?
They achieved something pretty remarkable with gene-edited japonica rice lines that's a common rice variety. With the standard recommended dose of fertilizer, these edited rice lines showed a 20% yield increase compared to normal rice. That's already good.
20%, okay.
But here's the real kicker, and this is a key insight for you, the listener, on efficiency. When they used only 10% of the recommended fertilizer dose.
Only 10%?
It's 10%. Compared to the control group getting that same low dose, the gene-edited rice showed a staggering 40% yield increase.
Wow. 40% more yield with 90% less fertilizer. That's incredible.
It really is. It demonstrates enormous potential for resource efficiency and making agriculture more sustainable.
That's a huge leap. How did they manage such precise results? Gene editing sounds complex. Did they just switch off a gene?
Well, that's the clever part. Previous attempts elsewhere sometimes involve knocking out an entire gene that acts as a repressor for phosphate uptake, a gene called OSWRKY6. But completely removing that gene had negative side effects, like poor overall growth, because the gene does other important things too.
Right, genes often have multiple jobs.
Exactly. So the NIPGR team took what the article calls a minimal invasive surgery approach, really precise. Instead of disabling the whole gene, they used CRISPR to snip out just a tiny, specific 30 base pair section on its promoter region. Think of it like a specific docking site or a control switch.
Just 30 letters of DNA code.
It's 30. Removing only that tiny binding site was enough to make the phosphate transporter mechanism work much more efficiently. It allows the plant to draw more phosphate from the soil before it becomes unavailable, all without messing up the gene's other essential functions. Very elegant.
It sounds incredibly precise. But, gene editing often raises concerns. Activists worry about things like IP rights, or unintended changes, or foreign DNA getting left behind.
Absolutely, and the article touches on how these are being addressed. On intellectual property, India is actively negotiating for access to or licenses for the CRISPR-Cas9 technology itself.
Okay. What about mistakes, like off-target edits?
That's a big one. Scientists use sophisticated software now to predict potential off-target sites where the CRISPR tool might accidentally cut. They then rigorously test the most likely off-target spots in the edited plants. Any plants showing unintended edits are simply discarded. It's a careful screening process.
And the foreign DNA issue. Does stuff from the editing process remain?
Initially, yes. The CRISPR system often uses bacteria or viruses to get into the plant cells. But this foreign DNA can be removed pretty easily in the next generation. Through standard breeding techniques, just basic Mendelian genetics, they can select offspring plants that have inherited the desired edit, but not the foreign DNA components. It segregates out naturally.
So the potential benefits seem huge, especially for a country like India.
Immense. India relies almost entirely on imports for phosphate fertilizers. This kind of technology could drastically reduce that dependence, cut costs for farmers, and significantly lessen the environmental impact of rice farming. It's a big step towards sustainable agriculture.
Okay, from boosting food production, let's turn to a much more concerning global trend now. Our fifth source, this one from the text section, looks at the rising tide of global military spending. It starts with NATO's recent pledge to potentially increase defense spending goals up to maybe 5% of GDP for members by 2035, and this fits into a bigger picture.
It certainly does. The article uses data from CPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and the figures are pretty stark. Global military spending hit a staggering $2,718 billion in 2024. That's dollars, not rupees.
$2.7 trillion. Wow.
And it represents a 9.4% increase from the previous year. That's the highest single-year jump since 1988, towards the end of the Cold War. This surge is largely driven by ongoing conflicts, obviously the war in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, but also tensions involving India, Pakistan, Israel, Iran contributing to 2025.
And who's doing most of the spending?
It's highly concentrated. The US, China, and Russia lead the way, accounting for a massive chunk of the total. NATO members combined make up about 55% of all global military spending.
Now, what's really fascinating and quite sobering is the article's exploration of the trade-offs. It talks about a crowding out effect. What does that mean?
It means that this massive increase in military spending directly squeezes funding for other critical public goods. The most prominent example discussed is domestic health spending.
So more guns literally means less butter or less healthcare.
Essentially, yes. The article points to documented impacts, especially in middle and low-income countries where budgets are tighter. But even high-income nations feel it. Spain, for instance, is mentioned as having opted out of this new NATO target, explicitly citing that the huge extra cost, around 300 billion euros, would force cuts to welfare programs.
And this affects international efforts too, like the UN.
Severely. It contributes significantly to the UN funding crisis. The UN's entire budget for development, humanitarian aid, peacekeeping operations is minuscule in comparison, about $44 billion proposed. But it's struggling to even get that funded, receiving only $6 billion in the first 6 months recently. Meanwhile, the article notes the U.S. likely spent nearly $1 billion just on missile interceptors during one 12-day conflict period. The scales are just vastly different.
That disparity is incredible. And the article connects this to actual human lives lost.
It does. It mentions a striking Lancet study. This study estimated that cuts in U.S. foreign aid through USAID, potentially linked to shifting priorities, could lead to an additional 14 million deaths by 2030.
14 million.
14 million excess deaths, with a third of those being children under 5. It highlights the devastating, though often indirect, humanitarian consequences when resources are diverted on such a massive scale. This really brings home the peace paradox mentioned in the source.
The peace paradox, meaning spending on defense might actually undermine security in other ways.
Precisely. The argument is that while proponents claim massive spending prevents war, the evidence here suggests it's actively eroding human security globally. It diverts colossal funds from health, climate action, poverty reduction, creating different, perhaps more insidious forms of instability.
Does the article challenge the idea that this spending actually prevents war effectively?
It does, implicitly and explicitly. It points out the huge asymmetry between NATO and Russian spending, for example. Russia's economy is about 25 times smaller than NATO's combined, and its military spending is about 10 times less. Yet conflict persists. Furthermore, this spending actively undermines progress on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, things like poverty eradication, climate action.
Climate action, too.
But how? Well, increased military production, training, operations, they all have a significant carbon footprint. The article estimates that if NATO hits even a 3.5% GDP spending target, it could add 200 million tons of greenhouse gases annually.
Wow. So it diverts money from climate solutions and actively contributes to the problem.
Exactly. At a time when we're seeing record heat waves and climate impacts, it's diverting scarce resources needed for mitigation and adaptation. It's a stark illustration of interconnected global challenges.
Okay, for our final deep dive today, let's pivot to the future of technology and innovation, specifically focusing on India. Our last source, also from the text section, discusses India's push towards something called DeepTech, a term highlighted by Minister Piyush Goyal. What actually is DeepTech? It sounds like more than just the usual buzzwords like AI or robotics.
It definitely is broader and more fundamental. The article defines deep tech as technology that's really grounded in scientific discovery, in deep engineering excellence, and fundamental research. It's not just about applying existing tech in new ways, it's about creating genuinely new capabilities based on breakthroughs. So yes, AI can be part of it, but it also includes things like advanced material science.
Like what makes batteries better or drones lighter.
Exactly. Or power electronics, synthetic biology, molecular drug research. It's about bold and original work, as the article puts it. Building things from the ground up, often involving long research cycles, lots of trial and error.
So less about apps, more about the foundational stuff.
Precisely. It's about the core chemistry in a battery, like what powers DYD's success, or the fundamental physics behind a new sensor, building from scratch, not just assembling components.
The article lays out 5 core pillars needed to build a strong deep tech ecosystem. But it seems to suggest India has some catching up to do in certain areas. What are the critical missing links?
Well, one major point the article emphasizes is the need for a stronger product mindset in India. It poses a pretty direct question, which globally recognized products across different sectors, not just software, were actually conceived and built in India.
That's a tough question.
It is. Even in software, where India has huge talent, the article notes it hasn't produced foundational platforms like, say, TensorFlow or Android. This suggests a relative weakness in originating and building globally competitive products domestically.
And linked to that.
Linked to that is the need for a more robust R&D culture, particularly among founders. The article contrasts with Silicon Valley, where founders of companies like Google, Tesla, Microsoft were often engineers or scientists deeply immersed in the core technology themselves. There's a call for more founders in India with that deep, hands-on technical expertise driving innovation from within.
And this connects back to education, presumably.
Absolutely. The article stresses the need to shift the educational ecosystem, moving beyond just teaching students how to use current tools and software towards a stronger focus on the fundamentals, the underlying science and engineering principles, and fostering more multidisciplinary collaboration, bringing different fields together, like you see at places like MIT or Stanford.
So it sounds like a big systemic shift is needed across founders, education. Yeah. What about the government's role in fostering deep tech?
The government's role is seen as crucial, but it needs to be smarter government support, not just funding. A key suggestion is creating shared, affordable infrastructure. Things like fabrication labs, fab labs, pilot manufacturing facilities, specialized testing and certification centers.
Why is that so important?
Because these facilities are incredibly expensive. Individual startups, especially early-stage deep tech ones, simply can't afford to build their own clean rooms or advanced testing rigs. Having access to shared, high-quality facilities bridges that critical gap between a lab idea and a viable, tested product ready for market. It lowers the barrier to entry significantly.
So connecting this all together,
Yeah.
it's about a coordinated effort.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the article argues that this systemic transformation, improving the product mindset, deepening the R&D culture through education, and providing smart government support with shared infrastructure is vital. It's presented as the path for India to move beyond being a service provider or assembler towards becoming a true global leader in creating original, science-driven deep tech innovations born in India and built for the world.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.